In the pulsing heart of New York City, where the streets hum with restless energy, lived a couple whose love story seemed ripped straight from a fairy tale. But behind the closed doors of their modest Brooklyn apartment, secrets festered like poison, ready to obliterate everything they'd built. What if the person you trusted most hid a truth so shattering it could destroy your body and soul? David Carter was 32, a sharp-dressed, ambitious guy with charm that could light up any room. His confidence was electric, his deep voice grabbing attention in boardroom meetings. David's dark brown eyes had a spark that Rochelle, his wife of 6 years, had fallen for back in high school. Rochelle Carter, 30, was the picture of resilience, with her caramel-toned skin, curly shoulder-length hair, and a smile that could soothe the hardest hearts. She was stunning and selfless. As a nurse, she worked grueling shifts, her hands often calloused from the long hours she put in to chase their shared dream of a better life. On the surface, they were a power couple. Their love had carried them through rough patches, from scraping by on ramen noodles to the modest comfort they now had in their 2-bedroom Brooklyn spot. But beneath the smiles and Instagram-perfect photos, their marriage was teetering on the edge of collapse. David's promotion 6 months back had been a game-changer. Jamal Dixon, his 45-year-old boss, was a heavy hitter. Tall, broad-shouldered, and always dressed to kill, Jamal oozed dominance. His eyes seemed to pierce right through people, and his words carried serious weight. For David, Jamal wasn't just a mentor. He was the key to climbing the ladder. But Jamal wanted more than David's loyalty at work. He wanted David, period. It started small, or at least that's what David told himself. Jamal invited him to a networking dinner at a swanky Manhattan bar. The night went smooth. Drinks were strong. Conversation was flattering. Jamal hyped up David's work ethic, calling him indispensable. As the night dragged on, the compliments got personal. "You got this vibe, man," Jamal said, leaning in close. "People can't help but notice you." David laughed it off, flattered but uneasy. He didn't clock how Jamal's hand lingered on his shoulder when they said goodnight. A week later, during a late-night project review at the office, Jamal shut the door to his corner office and poured them both glasses of whiskey. The convo shifted to uncharted territory. "You ever feel trapped, David?" Jamal asked, his voice low. David hesitated, unsure how to answer. "Trapped in your life? Your marriage? Like you're living for everybody but you?" The words hit hard. Rochelle's sacrifices always weighed heavy on David, and while he loved her, the spark between them had faded. Before he knew it, Jamal's hand was on his, their eyes locked. That night, in the privacy of Jamal's office, a line was crossed. Jamal kissed him, and David, torn, but hooked, didn't pull back. The kiss was slow, deliberate, and packed with an intensity that left David breathless. Over the next few weeks, David got caught up in a double life. At home, he played the devoted husband, but at work, he was Jamal's lover, sneaking off to secluded hotel rooms and dimly lit bars. Rochelle started picking up on it. David, once all in and loving, got distant. He was glued to his phone, ducking into the bathroom for calls. Their intimacy dried up, and when she reached for him, he'd brush her off, saying he was wiped out. One night, Rochelle tried to spark things up with a romantic dinner. She slipped into his favorite red dress, the one he used to say made her look like a queen. But when David walked in, he barely glanced her way. "What's all this?" he asked, his tone flat. "I thought we could chill together," Rochelle said, hiding her hurt. "Not tonight, Rochelle. I got work," he replied, pecking her cheek with a touch colder than she remembered before disappearing into the bedroom. As he shut the door, Rochelle stood in the kitchen, staring at the table she'd spent hours setting. The candles burned low, wax pooling onto the cloth, just like her hope for their marriage melted away. The breaking point hit one night when David came home late, reeking of cologne that wasn't his. Rochelle, who'd been pretending to sleep, felt her chest tighten. The next morning she waited till he left for work, then tore through his stuff, pockets, briefcase, everything. She found it. A second phone stashed in his gym bag. Her hands shook as she unlocked it and scrolled through texts. What she read made her stomach churn. Jamal, last night was wild. I can still taste you. David, can't stop thinking about you. When we linking up again? Tears blurred Rochelle's vision as she kept scrolling, explicit texts, photos, hotel bookings. That evening she confronted him, her anger boiling over. "Who's Jamal?" she demanded, slamming the phone on the table. David's face went pale. "Rochelle, I can explain." "Explain what? That you're sleeping with your boss? That you've been lying to me for months?" David fumbled for words, but Rochelle, eaten up by rage, hurled a glass across the room. It shattered against the wall. "You disgust me," she spat. "Do you even get what you've done to us?" But David's betrayal cut deeper than she knew. In his desperation to keep the affair going, he'd ignored the risks, putting both Rochelle's health and his own on the line. Unbeknownst to her, she'd already started feeling the fallout of David's secret life. Exhaustion, random fevers, and a nagging cough had been hitting her for weeks. She chalked it up to stress from her brutal job, but the truth was way darker. David's affair with Jamal wasn't just emotional or physical. It was a deadly gamble, and the consequences of his choices were about to crash down on them both. The cracks in their marriage had split into a gap too wide to bridge, and the foundation of their lives was crumbling. Rochelle wasn't just fighting her husband's betrayal, she was fighting for her survival. Betrayal's a sharp blade, but when it's laced with hidden dangers, it doesn't just wound, it destroys. Rochelle thought she'd uncovered the full scope of David's lies, but the real cost was a nightmare she couldn't have imagined. After finding out about David's affair, Rochelle was stuck in a fog of disbelief and fury. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, her mind racing with questions she wasn't ready to face. How could he do this? Why Jamal? But as her anger burned, her body started betraying her in ways she couldn't ignore. Her cough got worse. Her fevers spiked, and a rash spread across her arms. When she passed out one morning in the kitchen, she finally dragged herself to a doctor. In the sterile exam room, Rochelle clung to a shred of hope that it was just stress or exhaustion. The doctor, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, frowned as she went over Rochelle's symptoms. "I want to run some blood tests," she said softly, "just to rule out anything serious." Rochelle nodded, her stomach twisting. 2 days later, a phone call shattered her world. "Mrs. Carter," the doctor started, her voice heavy. "I need you to come in to discuss your test results." "Just tell me," Rochelle insisted, gripping the phone tight. A pause. Then the words hit like a sledgehammer. "You've tested positive for HIV." The room spun. Rochelle dropped the phone, her knees buckling as she crumpled to the floor. Tears streamed down her face, her chest heaving with sobs. "How? Why?" The question screamed in her head, but deep down, she already knew the answer. When David got home that night, Rochelle was waiting, her eyes, once warm and welcoming, now ice-cold with rage. "We need to talk," she said, her voice shaking. David froze, sensing the storm. "What's wrong?" Rochelle threw the test results at him. "You gave me HIV, David," she screamed. David's face went white and he stammered, "That's not possible, I don't have it." "Don't lie to me," Rochelle shouted, her voice cracking. "I know about Jamal. I know everything." Cornered, David broke down. "It wasn't supposed to go like this," he muttered, running his hands through his hair. "How long?" Rochelle demanded, her voice like steel. David hesitated, then spilled, 6 months. It started when he promoted me." "And you didn't think to protect me? To protect yourself?" "I didn't know," David said weakly, tears streaming down his face. "I didn't think." "You didn't think?" Rochelle snapped. You destroyed everything, David. Everything. Fueled by rage and desperation, Rochelle made a choice that would change it all. She wasn't letting Jamal walk away clean. She needed answers and revenge. The next day, she stormed into Jamal's office unannounced, blowing past the receptionist, her fury making her unstoppable. Jamal, behind his massive desk, looked up, surprised. "Mrs. Carter, what brings you here?" "You know exactly why I'm here," Rochelle hissed, slamming the door shut. Jamal leaned back, his calm vibe infuriating. "I take it David told you." "Told me you ruined my marriage, my life," Rochelle screamed. "And now I'm sick because of you." Jamal's face darkened. "I didn't force David into anything. He made his choices. And you didn't care about the consequences," Rochelle shot back, her voice trembling. Jamal stood, his towering presence intimidating. "Watch yourself, Rochelle. You don't want to make an enemy of me." But Rochelle wasn't backing down. "You think you're untouchable? We'll see about that." Her anger fueled her drive. Over the next few weeks, she started digging, hell-bent on exposing Jamal. She combed through David's phone records, emails, even tailed Jamal to his secret meetups. But as she dug deeper, she uncovered something uglier. Jamal wasn't just David's lover. He was neck-deep in illegal stuff, using his position to launder money and manipulate employees. Rochelle realized she'd stumbled into a web of corruption, and she wasn't the only victim. One night, she confronted David again. "You need to go to the cops," she said. "Are you crazy? Jamal will ruin me," David protested. "Ruin you? He's already ruined us," Rochelle spat. "Do you even care what you've done to me?" David hung his head, his silence loud enough. That night, Rochelle made another call. If David wouldn't act, she would. She set up a meet with Jamal at a quiet bar, playing it like she wanted to hash things out. Dressed in all black, her face a mask of cold resolve, she slipped a small knife into her purse. When Jamal showed up, he greeted her with a smirk. "I was wondering when you'd come to your senses." Rochelle didn't bite. Instead, she slid a manila folder across the table. "What's this?" Jamal asked, opening it to find copies of incriminating emails and photos. "Insurance," Rochelle said. "Either you confess everything and clear my name, or I take this to the cops and your wife." Jamal's smirk vanished, replaced by a dangerous glint in his eye. "You don't know who you're messing with. And you don't know what I'm capable of," Rochelle fired back. The convo got heated, their voices climbing until Jamal grabbed her wrist. "You're playing a dangerous game," he warned. Rochelle, her pulse pounding, yanked her hand free. "The game's over, Jamal." In a flash of blind rage, Rochelle pulled the knife from her purse and plunged it into Jamal's side. As he collapsed, clutching his wound, Rochelle stood frozen, her breath ragged. Blood pooled on the floor, and the weight of what she'd done hit her like a train. She grabbed her purse and bolted, leaving Jamal gasping for air. The next morning, news of Jamal's death spread like wildfire. David, wrecked and terrified, confronted Rochelle. "What did you do?" he demanded, his voice shaking. "What I had to," Rochelle replied, her face unyielding. But as the cops closed in, the true cost of their tangled lies and betrayal was about to come crashing down. The web of deceit and vengeance had claimed one life, but the fallout was far from over. As Rochelle and David wrestled with the chaos they'd unleashed, the truth burned brighter and deadlier. In the end, no one escapes the weight of betrayal. The blood on Rochelle's hands wasn't just physical, it was a permanent mark of her slide into a dark, unrecognizable version of herself. She hadn't slept since fleeing Jamal's lifeless body. Every knock at the door sent her heart racing. David, a nervous mess, paced their small Brooklyn apartment. Jamal's murder was all over the news, and their affair was the talk of everyone who knew. The cops hadn't made an arrest yet, but Rochelle knew time was running out. "You gotta turn yourself in," David said one night, his voice shaky. "Turn myself in? You're just as responsible for this as I am," Rochelle snapped. David froze. What are you talking about? You brought him into our lives, David. You lied, cheated, and gave me HIV. You set this whole thing in motion. She spat, her voice cracking under the weight of it all. Detectives tore through Jamal's office and home, piecing together the lead-up to his death. His financial records exposed a web of illegal deals, but they also pointed to one very personal betrayal, a scandalous affair with David Carter. The connection was airtight, and soon the cops came knocking at David's door. We need to ask you a few questions, one detective said, his tone cold and professional. David hesitated, his eyes flicking to Rochelle, who stood frozen in the hallway. Sure, he stammered, letting them in. The interrogation was brutal. The detectives laid out every dirty detail: David's affair with Jamal, the HIV diagnosis, and the blowout fight Rochelle had with Jamal days before his murder. As the walls closed in, Rochelle's guilt and fear ate her alive. She started unraveling, snapping at David, spiraling into paranoia. Her once iron resolve was now a fragile front. One night, as David slept fitfully on the couch, Rochelle sat in the kitchen, staring at the blood-stained knife she'd hidden in a drawer. Her mind replayed Jamal's final moments, his eyes wide, with shock and pain as he collapsed. She knew the only way to protect herself was to silence David. He was a loose end, a liability that could take her down. Rochelle played it cool the next day, cooking David's favorite meal and acting like she wanted to patch things up. But as they sat at the table, the tension was thick. "I'm sorry for everything," Rochelle said softly, her eyes brimming with tears. David, worn out and broken, nodded. "I just want this nightmare to end." As he reached for his drink, Rochelle's hands shook. She'd spiked it with a heavy sedative, set on erasing the last trace of her guilt. But David, suspicious of her sudden kindness, paused. "Why are you being so nice to me?" he asked, his voice edged with distrust. Rochelle's mask cracked. "Just drink it," she snapped. David's eyes widened, realization hitting. "What did you do?" Before he could react, Rochelle lunged, a kitchen knife in hand. A struggle broke out, their screams bouncing off the apartment walls. In a tragic twist, David wrestled the knife from her, but not before she landed a fatal blow. The cops showed up minutes later, tipped off by neighbors who heard the chaos. They found Rochelle bleeding out on the floor, and David slumped against the wall, the knife still in his hand. In her final moments, Rochelle whispered, "I had to do it. I had to end it." David, clutching his side, was cuffed and taken away, barely hanging on. The trial was a media circus, a scandal that gripped Brooklyn and beyond. David was charged with involuntary manslaughter for Rochelle's death and tied to Jamal's murder. His defense painted him as a victim of manipulation and abuse, pointing to Rochelle's crumbling mental state and her role in the chaos. But the prosecution had damning evidence: David's affair, the HIV transmission, and the toxic relationship that ended in bloodshed. In a jaw-dropping twist, it came out that Rochelle had secretly recorded conversations with David, where he admitted to knowing about Jamal's illegal dealings and the HIV risk. The courtroom gasped as the tapes played, showing David as a willing player in the mess. After weeks of testimony, the jury dropped its verdict: David Carter, guilty of involuntary manslaughter in Rochelle's death and an accessory to murder in Jamal's case. The judge slapped him with 35 years in prison, a sentence that split the courtroom. Some saw him as a victim of his own screw-ups. Others pegged him as a scheming opportunist who'd wrecked lives for his own gain. David's lockup closed the book on a tragic saga, but the scars lingered. Rochelle's family grappled with the loss, and Jamal's widow hit David with a civil suit for emotional and financial damages. The HIV diagnosis that sparked the unraveling became a rallying cry for awareness and prevention. But for those closest to the tragedy, it was a bitter reminder of betrayal's cost. In his prison cell, David replayed the events over and over, haunted by the choices that led to his fall. As the years dragged on, he faced one brutal truth. Some betrayals can't be undone, and their consequences echo forever.